But hey, let's do a lecture. Do you remember what kind of cadence goes from 5 to 6? It's a deceptive cadence. Let's talk about the types of cadences again. So we've got Schenker's favorite chords, 1, 4, and 5. Our goal is to arrive at 1. So typical chord progression goes like this. 1, 4, 5, 1. And all music is built off of that. Key relationships are all around the idea of tonic, subdominant, dominant, and tonic again. So when I'm doing a cadence, I'm achieving one of a few goals. 2, really, because we also have the relationship of the relative minor, and then over here, the subdominant of the relative minor, and then the dominant of the relative minor, and then back to the relative minor. So I'm usually going to have a cadence arrive at 1. Now, the best way to do that is using the dominant, and that is an authentic cadence. If I'm not going 5 to 1, I'm going 4 to 1. This is so not common, but it is the plagal cadence. If I stop on a 5 chord, usually 4, sometimes 1, sometimes replacements for either of those, that's a half cadence. Because of the nature of the functions of the chords, the dominant function of 5, meaning that it wants to lead to the tonic, means if we stop on 5 at the end of a phrase, then it is a half cadence because we are halfway to our goal. The subdominant's not even halfway. So we're not going to end cadences on the subdominant. We will end phrases on the subdominant, but it does not qualify as a cadence point unless you're Wagner. Then we look over here, and then 5 leading to 6. You will notice 6 being the relative minor in a major key. Meaning it shares a key signature with the tonic and therefore has a similar function, and often will have entire chunks of music that are dedicated to that particular chord. This is called a deceptive cadence. I'll just abbreviate. How about that? A deceptive cadence has the purpose of it almost is 1, but it's also really not nice to do it. So like... And that's the thing I did yesterday that made Sarah mad, so let's fix it. So the idea of we want to lead to the tonic, we set up the tonic as our arrival point, and then suddenly we don't go there. Let's look at the authentic cadence a little bit closer. This is all review from yesterday's stream. Leading 5 to 1, being an authentic cadence. No inversion. Second off, melody is do, is the perfect authentic cadence. What that means is then both the bass and melody are do. If the leading tone chord leads to 1, that is an imperfect. What you're not hearing is scale degree 5. The reason that matters is that scale degree 5 is the common tone between the 5 chord and the 1 chord. So that would be an imperfect. If we do this, like the 5, 6 to 1, that's an imperfect authentic. 5 to 1, melody is mi or sol, then all of those are imperfect authentic cadences. Now we're at the lecture. So here we go. Let's listen to some more cadences, some additional examples. Let's do the Schumann example here. Tell me what type of cadence we're ending on. Are we there yet, is the question. The answer is, here's the tonic triad, and here was the chord we ended on, which was a half cadence. The plagal cadence is not going to be found in very many cases except for when we are finishing up hymns. So here's an example where they actually have Holy Holy in the key of E major of all places. That's our perfect authentic cadence, but then we do this. And what's the name for the type of cadence that they like to finish off with in hymns? Yes, Sarah, plagal cadences. You are correct. Amen. And then sometimes we do a pedal 6/4 of the 4 chord here. Instead of doing that, we do this. And then we resolve. That's a pedal 6/4 of the subdominant. When we talk about harmonic rhythm, let's move on now. Harmonic rhythm. If I'm in 4/4 and I don't want to change the chord too often, I might do like Holy Holy, which is, that's 2 beats. That's 2 beats. That's 2 beats. So in that example, the harmonic rhythm is half notes, because every 2 beats I'm changing the chord until the final measure, which is the cadence point, we get a whole note, and that's very, very common. You might want to change your chords more often. For example, the Schumann example we just looked at did this. In that example, the harmonic rhythm ended up being quarter notes, although the first measure it was half notes. The chord only changed, it was only 2 chords in that measure. So harmonic rhythm, the rate at which the harmonies change, that's important because when you are writing compositions, you will want to make a conscious decision about how often to change your chords. And a very common thing to do is to do a bunch of half notes or quarter notes and just be very consistent and then stop on a strong beat. Now we move on to phrases. So phrases, as a review, I guess I can go up here and do it. So there we go, we've just reviewed. So we're gonna group our phrases in groups of 2 phrases often. And that's almost always going to be antecedent and consequent, which is a musical question and a musical answer. And then that is called a period. So let's move on to the to page 150 of the textbook. What we're talking about now is the motif, or the motive, is the smallest what? The smallest what? Yeah, musical thingy. I mean, that's close. It's the smallest musical idea. Now, the book says smallest identifiable musical idea, but I guess if we're not identifying it, we're not calling it anything. If I were to play a piece of music that goes like this is Haydn. Did you notice the motif was this? The motif is the building block for how the phrase was constructed. Because we got our way towards it. We worked our way towards the motif. And right there, we're going to construct the rest of this phrase off the motif. And then we're going to then build the rest of this phrase off the motif. Check it out. All of that was built off of this motif. Check it out. It's like a subversion of the motif. From motifs, we don't have to always build our musical ideas off of motifs, but it's a great way to build your music. Another thing that we can do then is, after that, we get the subphrase. Not every phrase is built off of subphrases, but it's a very common way to build our musical ideas. So, for example, here is a 4-measure phrase built of 2 2-measure phrases, subphrases. So here's subphrase number 1. That's part of a musical idea, but let's add one more. So that is a phrase built of 2 subphrases. Again, we don't always have to build our phrases off of subphrases or motifs, but they are the building block of music. They are a very common way to build our musical ideas. So let's listen to this Mozart piece and let's see if we can figure out what the motif is that's being used in Mozart's music in this particular piece. This is page 152 of the 8th edition. This is the piece Andi Freude. If we had Ryan here, he could correct me on that. So what we want to listen to is bum ba da dum, because that gets used twice in the first phrase. And then we end the phrase with Ti-do. And that's a deceptive cadence because we went step up instead of the 5-to-1 leap. And then from there, let's hear how the motif of ba da da dum and how the ending motif of da da are used in subsequent phrases. So rhythmically, we are using this right here. Let's switch over to Sibelius. Hey, check it out. It's Sibelius. Moving my toolbars around real quick. Okay, here we go. So I'm just going to put in the time signature of 2-4. So every time we see this rhythm, I should probably put in the correct key signature. Now there's something that I don't like the finale does. It's by default when you change the key signature, it modulates your music. Transposes it, and whereas here there's the option, there's an option to do it yourself, and it's part of the modulation or transposition option is to change the key signature. Anyway, so that right there, rhythmically, when we see this right here, bum, ba, da, dum, when we hear that rhythm, that is part of the motif, because motifs can be rhythmic in nature. So let's listen to phrase number 2. It's all over the place. And then our phrase here is so do in the bass, which is 5-1, and over here is the third of the chord, so that's an imperfect authentic cadence, going back to previous parts of the lecture, which is here. Yay! Okay, moving on from that phrase, let's get another phrase. That's rhythmically our motif. That is an inversion of the motif that Mozart used to finish the first phrase, which was step up. And now we're going to flip that, step down. Now, I'm not saying this is like some mind-shatteringly genius moment of Mozart's intellect as much as it's just a thing that happens a lot. Here's our rhythmic motif. Step up. Step up. Here's another phrase. Check out, it's going to have that same idea as the opening phrase. And then we're going to end it with an inversion of the step up. It's going to be multiple steps down. Here's another phrase. Now what I like here is going all the way up. So latido is actually rhythmically the first motif, and melodically the second motif that he's been using, which is stepping up to an arrival point. And it's really interesting here, unison between bass and soprano, because he's Mozart. And then here's another phrase. We're working our way back towards our opening ideas. Stepping down. Stepping down. Stepping down. Now, if you were looking at the textbook, you will see that our phrases go deceptive cadence, imperfect authentic, half cadence, deceptive cadence, perfect authentic on scale degree 5, which is in function a half cadence, and then imperfect authentic on scale degree 2, and then going back to F is a half cadence, imperfect, deceptive, and then at the very end, we get our line of mi, re, do, and then we finally get a perfect authentic cadence. Now, we've already talked about line in theory class over and over and over, but it's simply that most phrases and most compositions end with downward scales. So now we're going to move on to the period, because here he was sort of doing antecedent consequent with his music, but not really. He was often just, he did, what was it, 3 phrases in the key of F, which is not really antecedent consequent. It's just that the phrases work in a similar fashion as the period. So for example, yes, we're not at the tonic there in the bass, but it's not necessarily asking a musical question. His phrases aren't really asking musical questions a lot of times, so he wasn't really using antecedent consequent. But when we move on to the period form, which is the concept of question and answer, we hear it very strongly when it's actually being done. There's no ambiguity about whether a question is being asked. So here is a musical question. This is page 155 of the textbook. Name that cadence type. We've got at least 3 people watching right now, which is great for a test stream. Someone name that cadence type. I wonder if one of them is straight up just Streamlabs is watching. I wonder if that counts as a viewer. Anyway, what type of cadence was that? By the way, it doesn't make me self-conscious at all that I'm on Danielle's big screen TV. At all. Not at all. Oh, Danielle, I auditioned for the student-directed one-acts because I haven't acted on stage since 2000 and something. So I put myself out there and did a video audition, which was really interesting, and I sent it to Dr. Ewan and then discovered afterwards I was supposed to have used an English accent. So there was that. Anyone got an answer for me? What type of cadence was this? So here's the tonic, and here was the chord we stopped on. So, if it was an imperfect authentic, that would have been the first subphrase. So let's listen to the subphrases. Now, if we're not looking at the actual melody, which would be a perfect authentic, and we look at just the piano, that'd be an imperfect authentic cadence, but it's only a subphrase. So we've got to finish out the phrase to find the. Sorry, I've got sensory overload right now to find what type of cadence. So we got to keep going. So which one is it? Out of these right here, which one is it? Because we didn't get back to the tonic. So here's 1, here's 5, and here's 1. Close, close. So this would be 5 to 6. And here's what we did. It's a big old fat 5 chord. So this is actually a half cadence. Now, in the way of musical questions, well, right here, antecedent and consequent. In the way of a musical question, that's the question. Now we answer it. So ideally, that would mean we're going to a perfect authentic cadence. Ideally. I'm actually going to put the melody on top, because this is an art song, so there's a singer involved. So if our question was a half cadence, then what's the answer? Because our melody went do, fa, fa, mi, ti, do, re, do. So what type of cadence would that be harmonically? 5-1. And then what type specifically is it affected by the fact that the melody is on do and the bass is also not inverted? Yes, that's it. It is a perfect authentic cadence. It's the most satisfying type of cadence. So let's play really quickly, just like melody and bass of the opening phrase and then the answering phrase. There's our question. Here's our answer. So the questions are typically pretty easy to identify. Now, it does not mean that we always go with a musical question followed by a musical answer to achieve antecedent consequent. Sometimes you turn it on its head. Just like how sometimes the question could be imperfect followed by a perfect answer, sometimes if you're Mozart, your question is actually a perfect authentic and the answer is not. So, for example, that's a perfect authentic. How does he answer that? He answers with an imperfect. So questions don't have to sound like questions. So then there's other examples in the book of half cadence being answered by a perfect authentic. But let's look at one where there's two antecedents. There's our question, half cadence. What are we going to do after that? There's another question. There's another half cadence. So where do we go from there? That's totally a perfect authentic because we're in root position and our melody is on scale degree 1. So what happened here, this composition is Mozart, The Marriage of Figaro, Voi che sapete. I butcher anything that I butcher Italian, I butcher German, any of those languages. So bear with me, but it's an aria from Marriage of Figaro where there are two musical questions. So we go dominant triad. Also dominant, another half cadence. So do we answer it with two answers? Or what are we doing? I feel like half this textbook is simply Mozart breaking the rules. But anyway, it's actually antecedent, consequent. So it's 3 phrases. Now that's not as common as what we're about to talk about. Which is, what is that? Let's call this question answer. You ever answer a question with a question, the Socratic method? That's what's going on here. So what is the term for question and answer? Which would be or. So what we're talking about here is a period form that ends in a question, followed by a period form that answers the question. What is the term? Double period. Exactly correct. So we can erase this part right here. Yes. So just like how we can build a subphrase off of a motif, or we can build a phrase off of a subphrase, we don't have to. What is more common than simply doing antecedent consequent and moving on is actually the double period, which is where your first period is not a satisfying answer, or sometimes you just repeat the period. So here is an example of 3 half cadences and a perfect authentic, but you're going to hear similarities between antecedent 1 and antecedent 2, phrase 1 and 3. This is Beethoven. Music theory, these are the rules. If you break these, you'll die. Actually writing music, time to die. It's kind of true. You learn the rules because you need to learn what is normal in classical music, because then as a performer, anytime a composer does something that's not normal, you can do the old eyebrow raise and you can make it interesting. So here was your question. Now I'm going to play phrase number 3. Did you catch what happened there? Phrase 1 and 3 are almost identical. Here's phrase 1 again. Here's phrase 3. So, the same question gets asked twice. Second time around, there's more notes, but it's the same question. Let's just play all the phrases now, and we're going to hear how the first phrase is answered versus how the last one is. You catch that? It's not really an answer. That's very similar. That's identical to how the first consequent started. But how are we going to finish it? Because we want to end on a tonic triad, not on a dominance. So an line, mi, re, do. 3, 2, 1. That's an line. So whereas the first consequent ends like this, essentially fa, mi, re. Instead, we do mi, re, do. So we have an line that's incomplete the first time around, and then it's complete the second time around. Now, a parallel double period is, what we're referring to here is where our two antecedents are almost identical. There is something called a repeated double period, which is the composer was not really feeling it today and decided to write the same thing twice, maybe with variation, maybe not. Why do I have emails about coronavirus right now? You guys are like a week late on that. Okay, moving on. The sentence. And then we will be done, because I think we've been like, 45 minutes, yeah. So, period plus what we'll call, what's the term, Sarah? What is the term for what follows a period in order to qualify as a sentence? I want to know if you remember. I don't want to make Danielle be on the spot. It's been, what, 20 years since you were in college or something like that? And also, PJet can also answer. The idea of the sentence is period plus something equals sentence. And sentence, it was very common in the classical period. Mozart, sometimes Beethoven, Haydn, all of them, they used the sentence a lot as a way to begin the sonata form, or sonata allegro form. It's the first movement of a sonata, a concerto, a symphony, all of those forms. I will play a few of them while I wait for my answer. These are all sentences, so they're going to start with question and answer, and then something else, and then we're done, and that's the sentence. It doesn't mean the piece is done, it means the section is done. That was our antecedent consequent, by the way. That's the question. Here's the answer. Now here's what follows. going to play that last bit again. You tell me if there's any questions actually being answered. If there's ever a moment where the phrase stops for a moment. Like, this is a stopping of a phrase. And then here's a stopping of a phrase. Now tell me if the phrase ever stops to catch a breath, meaning we have a cadence. I'm reading and playing at the same time. Did we ever stop for a cadence point except that last one? And while you think about the answer to that, Danielle, I think it has been 3 because I think my cats are... No, wait. So I got my cats the summer that you and Josh and Josh's roommate, Anthony, came over to play D&D. And it was like the day I brought them home or the day after I brought them home. I have a really weird memory. It was a Tuesday. And that was the year, that was when you and Josh had just started dating. So you got married the following year. So it may have been 2, maybe 3 years ago at this point. If it's 3, it's because everything runs together because it feels like it's been 2. I saw you at graduation last year, so it probably was 3. Anyone have an answer for me? Did we ever stop musically? That's not really a stopping point. Next measure. We didn't stop, we just kept going. We're not done. Hey, I like the word continuation. That's a good word. It's essentially, so reading out of the textbook, here's what they've said, and then I'll say what I would say. Characterized by the... Bell says no. Characterized by the immediate repetition or variation of a musical idea followed by a motion toward a cadence. So what I like to use is the word melodic development. I don't say the word development by itself because that's a confusing term when you actually in Music Theory 3 or in Form class or whatever class your university has. Development's an entirely separate term in sonata form that follows the opening exposition of the form. So melodic development, college was a while ago. Melodic development is what occurs afterward, which is taking the musical ideas. In this case, the contrasting idea to the melody is that idea. Yeah, the music didn't stop to take a breath. You're exactly right. Right when you think that we're done, it keeps going. Like my favorite part is this part. We're going to keep going. Melodic development is the term I like to use. And it's the idea, and often you could also say scale work. You could say scale work if you want to. Mozart was huge on that. For example, the example I gave you earlier of a period. That's a PAC. That's an IAC. And then we move on. We're still going. We're not done. This is all from memory, sorry. Check it out. It's very similar to... It's just the same idea, which is lots and lots of scale work. Now, what's being elaborated on is that contrasting left-hand part. Did you hear that? It's almost like he takes that idea, which is actually almost an inversion of... It's the opposite direction. He takes that and bases the entire next 4 measures, I would say, off of that. So there you go. So melodic development means taking the ideas that you've been using in your subphrases, phrases, motifs, any of that, and then doing scales with it, I guess. So if I were to play you more examples, you would hear more of that. Now here's a question. And this is an example where I disagree with the book very strongly. The book is sometimes wrong. So the book says that this Mozart piano sonata, Köchel 279, begins with antecedent consequent, and then from there does melodic development into the ending of a sentence. So I would like to know what you can make of this piece. So there's our first phrase. Was there a cadence point? Because here's what actually happens. Spoiler, I need more coffee. Spoiler alert. That phrase was identical both times. That was not antecedent consequent. So here's what happens after that. Was there a question being asked there? No. Let's keep going. So if that's antecedent consequent, that would be two imperfect authentic cadences when Do is here. And then what happens after that? We're going to develop musical ideas. We're not done. Although we did stop there to take a breath. But we cadenced. This is really, really, really borderline not a sentence, but it's close enough. But the problem is, if a sentence is supposed to be a antecedent consequent followed by melodic development followed by a cadence, then what's this rigmarole? There's no question being asked there, especially because we repeat the whole thing. And then from there, now we actually get... Let's say that's an antecedent. So what is happening? What's the first four bars of this piece? I'll give you a moment to think over that, because it's my opinion that those first four bars, which is a 2-bar phrase that gets completely repeated, like every note for note, just repeated, that after those first 4 bars is when our sentence starts. That's our opening phrase. And that's our answer. Another imperfect authentic cadence, followed by melodic development. Sorry. We're not done. We're done. So, here's a question for you. How do we classify the first 4 measures? If our antecedent consequent into melodic development into cadence points is the sentence starting on measure 5, what are the first 4 bars? And this will end the lecture for today. I guess I should add in this while I wait for my answer. Sometimes a half cadence, sometimes not. In the first example it was, in the second example it wasn't. So what are the first 4 bars of this piece? If they are not the sentence, they are no part of the sentence whatsoever. I just want to see if you want to get that moments of aha. Musical fluff, I like it. What is the musical fluff that begins a piece that has nothing to do with the piece itself? So let's say I'm doing, I guess Technicolor Dreamcoat is good enough. Okay, Technicolor Dreamcoat. So the prologue of Technicolor Dreamcoat goes like this. And no one's singing. Has the form of the piece started? No. The form of the piece starts here. So what's the musical fluff in the first four measures? What's the term? It's a very specific term for starting a piece of music before the form actually starts. It's an obvious term. It means that we're setting the stage. The ear is getting accustomed to what's going to happen. Prelude is really good. Introduction would be another word. It's the introduction. So classical music doesn't often have an introduction. Sometimes it does. Beethoven's Third Symphony in E flat has an introduction. After that we go. That's when our melody starts. So other introductions, if you like Dr. Horrible, the very first song, My Freeze Ray, goes like this. And that's when he starts singing. It's a four-measure introduction. Well, Mozart actually gave himself a four-measure introduction in the form of repeating the same phrase twice. And that is today's lecture out of the Cascapane of chapter 10. Let's see how far we have left to go in this chapter, because I'm pretty sure we're done with this chapter. Hey, awesome, we're done with the chapter. We'll do a review on our next test stream, and then from there, I believe we get to transition into actual lecture next week, because classes start up again for Howard Payne. Yeah, that was actually, I think that went really well.